There is this resurgence right now, and you might have caught on to this through my videos, Greg's videos, and a lot of other people like Anabolic Sticks videos online, and it's that there's suddenly a lot of people claiming natural, which are very clearly not natural. Now, you might say,
well, they defended it, they got blood work, they did all they needed to do, and they are definitively natural.
But I would tell you that that's probably not true, because a lot of people see a very generic CBC and CMP panel and call it good. They see a full testosterone panel and they're like, well, his testosterone levels are normal. They call it good. That means he's not taking anything, of course, right? Because there's not other drugs that don't indicate as testosterone, even anabolic steroids in which don't measure his testosterone. So he's not on anything, even though he could be taking astronomical amounts of those other things. There's so many people who fall into the cope of believing that just a simple blood work panel is all you need. And as someone who has competed as a natural bodybuilder, an enhanced bodybuilder, and at this point coached confidently over hundreds of people doing bodybuilding shows enhanced and not, I can tell you the difference between individuals' blood work in terms of what's different from a natural versus enhanced individual is very minuscule, and it's in the small details, the small numbers. For example, LH and FSH usually are modified at quite a significant degree. You have issues with estradiol, progesterone, but most of these things are relatively similar. You can't really just say, oh, well, this person has a healthy cholesterol level, or this person has an in-range testosterone level, so they're good. I have people blasting cycles that are preposterous in which their testosterone levels are in range entirely. There's people who I have who just want to be absolutely dialed in for some kind of combat sport. We're using a variety of different peptides, and guess what? If you took their blood work and looked at it, you'd be like, this guy's completely natural. He's functionally producing his own testosterone and much, much more, and he looks like a freak, and he's performing like one. But the matter of the fact is, he's on a copious amount of peptides, which are not going to be detectable by any sort of lab work, nor a drug test, which is the craziest part. You think that these people are natural just because they throw up a CMP and a CBC panel that costs $30 from your local third-party provider. And I'm raging a little bit because there is this really weird stuff going on. I don't know. Check this out. So Greg recently posted this video, Fake Natty Blood Work Exposed. And it's about this guy who is honestly a really fucking impressive physique. I think his name's Radu, and he's been naturally competing for some time. He claims to have gained legitimately over 40 pounds in a single 16-month phase. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. I coach people using the most advanced protocols you could imagine. I mean, I'm talking using different things, varieties of different compounds. I get on consultation calls with other coaches in the industry who have clients who need help brainstorming ideas, and their clients are running some astronomical levels of shit that I would never do. But it is shocking to me to find that somehow, even with all this assistance and using every single pharmaceutical possible in the entire book, they're not able to match the rate of gain of individuals like this as they could naturally. Now you might be saying,
Kolton, this is bullshit. In this picture, this guy, Radu, is in a cut and then bulking.
He claims to be 18% fat in the picture on the right in February 2025. No, he's not. You wish this was 18% fat. This is closer to 14, 13, 15% body fat. He's saying this because it's going to make it seem like the weight he gained isn't as impressive. This is absolutely ridiculous. And of course, Greg makes a video about it. But what Greg says is that he's not natural. And it's verified, even though he has blood work that is more intricate than the blood work that Hussein Farhat had ever produced. And yet he claims that Hussein is completely natural. Really interesting there. He's picking sides quite clearly. And also that this guy is just a liar. It doesn't matter how many tests you get. You would have to be getting them regularly on a very frequent basis and be tested at random to be verified as natural. But Hussein didn't have to do that. I mean, this is just preposterous, right? We're seeing this like very picking sides thing going on. I don't think either of them are natural. I'll be very honest. There is a plethora of things that you can run and still pop up blood work right away and look great, right? And in the case of this individual, Radu, again, as somebody who often buys, gives people lab work, reviews lab work, gets on third-party calls with providers of medical care, talks about lab work with them and possible treatments to issues that might be present in people's lives, there is a very clear problem with the lab work that this individual's posted. So for instance, this individual posts some lab work and his LH and FSH are a bit skewed. In fact, he has an LH that is very clearly higher than his FSH, which should not be possible in a normal circumstance. And even if his testosterone levels are normal, his free testosterone's high, whatever. But what this really does indicate is that somebody is using something to reestablish a baseline intratesticular testosterone production. We're talking about things like human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG. But what we're more specifically talking about is a compound called gonadotropin releasing hormone, something that actually a lot of bodybuilders use when PCTing, post-cycle therapy, when they need to get off of drugs for whatever apparent reason. Maybe they're traveling, changing their life, or some other thing. You usually have to use some sort of therapeutics to re-establish a baseline HPTA function. This is a drug that is very commonly used, expensive, but very commonly used, works really effectively. But what it inherently does is essentially just increase LH, while FSH remains relatively normal. In fact, in some cases, it can actually decrease FSH in comparison to LH. And this is what we see in several clinical trials with humans, not just animals. You also see in his blood work that GGT is elevated. This is gamma glutamyl transferase. It's another enzyme that your liver has to deal with. It is a more accurate determination and depiction of hepatic function and bile duct function within your body than it would be the other transamerases, which would be like ALT and AST, a lot of what normal people use, and maybe another couple in there, but those are the two primary ones you'll always see on lab work. But this being elevated is pretty iffy, because I've seen people who run pretty large cycles, like really large cycles, compared to what the common man would be running for TRT, who have very normal levels of GGT. You wouldn't be able to tell that they were taking anything with GGT. It's in range. But then I've seen other individuals who run little bits of stuff, but it's mostly oral steroids, mostly 17 alkylated steroids, which are things like Anavar, Anadrol, D-bol, Winstrol. You can go down the list. But specifically, that's in the case where you'll see GGT elevated. I've almost never seen it elevated from hard training, from a calorie deficit, or anything like that. And I am talking about hundreds of labs I've viewed, because again, plug to my coaching, our team pays for lab work, right? So when you join Blood Bill Coaching, we pay for your lab work. So we get the data directly. We don't have to depend on someone getting for it. So that means every single client that we've ever gotten has gotten lab work. We've gotten their protocol. We've written their protocol. So we know very clearly, like very, very, very clearly, what's going to happen in response to input X and output Y. It's very clear. And in this case, again, I think we have an individual who is sort of this trophy chaser, this cloud chaser, trying to really emphasize how great of a natural he is. But maybe, look, maybe he is natural. But in all reality, what's probably happening is when he goes into his off season or his massing phase, he just literally starts blasting some kind of gear. Blasting, right? Like a light to elevated dose of any kind of androgen is going to be a lot for someone who's natural most of the year. And then once he gets into the preparation, you see that he actually gets pretty small. Like he shrinks down a lot. His fullness isn't as impressive, but more importantly, he probably just comes off, because for most drugs that you could use, especially for the non-injectables, you only need about 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks, depending on which one, for the metabolites to clear and become non-detectable. Even then, as I've talked about before, I am a PNBA pro bodybuilder, a natural bodybuilder before I went into the NPC. The drug tests they were doing are mostly on recreational drugs. And then when they do test these metabolites, they don't have the funding like big agencies have, the Olympics with WADA, UFC, these kinds of things. Natural shows have a very limited budget. And so the urinary metabolites that they're testing for are pathetic. Like you're not going to be, at least if you're somewhat intelligent, you're not going to be using these things. So what is likely the case with him, Husan, everybody else that we've talked about, is that they're just taking it up into the show and then coming off of it. So they don't test hot for anything. It doesn't look that crazy on blood work. And then they can reestablish baseline hormones by using other things like the few compounds we talked about, human chorionic gonadotropin and gonadotropin releasing hormone. There's a lot of different ones actually. Then there's a ton of them. Okay. You can even get like synthetic variants of FSH, LH. So there's a ton of things you can be using. And you might think that this stuff sounds really complicated and almost like laboratory type shit, but it's not. It is very easy and accessible to anyone at any point in time around the world. The drug market is huge. I think in America, we often have this perception that it's like this really underground, sketchy thing. I was just in Paraguay for a week, chilling out. You can go into the pharmacy and get whatever you want. Ozempic, brand named Ozempic, $12 per pop. Like in America, you're paying like $1,500 for a little pop of that thing. In Paraguay, you go up to the pharmacy, buy some Ozempic. Not a big deal, no prescription needed. It's fine. And so this is the reality of most of the world is like this stuff is really accessible. It is really easy to get. It's really easy easy to inform yourself about, and it wouldn't be hard to do this post labs and show, hey, I'm pretty natural. But what I also find wildly despicable is how Greg passes Hussein off as natty, but not this guy. Because again, this guy inherently did more testing than Fart Hat and has done more rigorous competing and drug testing than Fart Hat. Yet Fart Hat is indisputably natural for some reason. We don't know why, but for some reason. Because Greg says he is willing to take a drug test at any time. You know how this goes, right? And the reality is, here's how you know if someone is taking performance-enhancing drugs and almost why it is clearly impossible to tell directly if someone is taking anything. One, you can't test for peptides. So that's out of you're done. Like they could be taking every sort of GLP, they could be taking IGF-1 straight into the muscle, have a clearance rate of about 2 hours. So you can't test them if it's been, 2 hours after the injection, which, no one's going to be just injecting IGF-1 right before their blood test to see if they're natty or not. And you really can't test this stuff, right? Then the other problem that you have is you have to be measuring basically on a monthly basis. You have to create a biological passport, which indicates where is this person's cholesterol, LDL, HDL, lipoproteins, specifically apolipoprotein Bs, A100s, all these different variations of these things. They're lipoprotein differentiations. You need to be seeing these things real time on a month-to-month basis so that you can determine how much these things shift across a 12-month calendar year. If you see large variations within the month-to-month, you can pretty rest assured there's something going on. If things remain pretty consistent, which they should for a natural individual, there shouldn't be huge hormonal fluctuations, you can rest assured that that person's probably natural. So the whole point behind people getting one blood test, and a very cheap lab test at that, is just silly. You can get blood taken at any point in the year, but it's not really going to matter unless you do it repeated amounts of time, especially for a full calendar year, like something long, right? So we know very clearly this person is not taking drugs. Furthermore, I think what's even more important is if you say, well, I'm going to wait to do lab work until a few months later, okay? It's not the same. It doesn't work. You have to take lab work when the lab work is presented to you. If you call someone out for being a fake natty, Charlotte, and you say, hey, I'm going to give you blood work, and they say, hit me up in a couple months after my show, the drugs that you would be taking would be completely cleared out of your system by then, and especially the metabolic depression that you would see from those compounds would be completely cleared by then. So it becomes irrelevant. And ultimately, what I mean to say is that no natural individual, let's just be very honest here, is going to be gaining 40 pounds in a 16-month period. No natural individual is going to be changing their physique from day one to, 2 years later in a completely transformative way. It doesn't happen. I think a lot of people really underestimate how long it takes to build muscle, even when you are enhanced. We're talking about a decade timeline to build a physique that is really appreciable. This kind of stuff just seems so deceiving to me. And while there's hardcore fans of these individuals, I really think that they're coping so hard, to be honest with you. I don't know. This is kind of an off-the-cuff video. I just think what we're seeing right now is very odd. This reminiscent of that early 2015, 2013 era where everyone was saying that they were natural. Brad Castleberry, you had Dana Lynn Bailey saying they were doing these insane competitive feats, these insane bouts of strength, like truly impressive shit, but claiming they were natural. And then behind all of it, sponsoring themselves as a company or who knows what. We're seeing that come again, and it's a very, very odd time because we had this middle ground where everyone was on drugs. They'd talk about it all day long. Here's my cycle. Here's what I'm using. Here's where I get it from. But now it's like almost going back into this part where people are just coming out with these radically enhanced looking physiques saying that they're natural, just out of nowhere. You fat chance, bucko. I don't believe it. I don't buy it for a second. Maybe I'm just oblivious and there really is that many gifted people who just happen to stumble into bodybuilding, but I don't know. I don't believe it. There's almost no other sport in the world where that many people just suddenly surface out of nowhere and become the absolute elite on a yearly basis. The absolute elite. Especially within a short period of time. You don't find NFL players who, took 1 year and became an all-time superstar, the best there ever was, and is now just on top of the game, dominating, getting the best contracts. Like, it takes a couple years, it takes practice, it takes decades of time dedicated towards that craft. This isn't just instantaneous like this, that we're seeing 16 months, It's not 4 years, it's often decades. Anyways, folks, that's all I got for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, comment, like down below. It does me honestly so many fucking favors. You have no idea. And if you do subscribe, you're getting a Bugatti. I told you in the last video, I'll tell you in this one, you're gonna get a Bugatti. Just trust, have faith, brothers and sisters. There's a lot of sisters on this channel now, so have faith, sisters and brothers. Also, there's a GoFundMe down in the description. Not going to go into great detail. Just click it, read it, see what happened. That's all I need to say. Hope you have a beautiful day. See you later.